Hey there, welcome back to Trio Projects. Up until now, the only videos I've made here have been about old computers that I've been interested in. But that all changes today as we look at a nostalgic device from my past, and possibly yours too. Back in a time before Bluetooth speakers, you had the boombox. And specifically in our case, the Sony CFD-G700CP. So let's answer some questions. Are these any good today? And if you see one, is it worth picking up? Let's get into it. While growing up, one of my friends had a Sony Xplod boombox that we used to listen to all the time. It was the CFD-G700CP, and from what I can tell, it was the first boombox Sony made using the Xplod name. I'm pretty nostalgic for that boombox. I liked the aggressive styling and the large red subwoofer it had right up front. So when I came across a similar one at a thrift store, I couldn't help but pick it up to see if it lived up to the hype in my head. The only caveat was a note on the top saying that the cassette drive didn't work, and so now I had an excuse to take it apart. But before that, I wanted to look into this Xplod line to learn a little bit more about it, since these two boomboxes were the only thing that I'd come across with that name. As it turns out, there were a whole line of Xplod audio products, including those boomboxes. Speakers, subwoofers, head units, and more, with the loud red styling that screams mid-2000s. It's hard to say if these speakers were really any good for the standards of the day. Some people said they were terrible, while others found that they were decent value for the money. If you had some of these speakers in the past, drop a comment and let me know what you think. Whether they were good or not, it didn't stop them from ending up in cars like the Ford GTX-1 Roadster, or in showpieces like a Dodge truck Sony themselves put together, in which they managed to cram in all this gear, including 16 subwoofers. But, with all that out of the way, let's move on to our boombox. Now, I'm sure we all know what a boombox is, but let me give you a quick tour. We have our CD drive on the right and our cassette drive on the left. AM/FM radio with the antenna tucked in around the back. Audio input on the lower right via the included jack or the port at the back. A standard headphone connector on the lower left and a D-Lite connector on the back round out our ports. On top, we have our EQ and subwoofer toggles, and the screen on the front ties it all together. Right next to our screen, we have a sensor for an infrared remote. This would have come with one back in the day, but since I don't have it, I'm using a universal remote here. And finally on the bottom, we have our battery compartment that houses a whopping 8 D-cell batteries, which in any day and age are not cheap. And if you can believe it, the manual states you only get 1 hour of CD playback with all those batteries, unless of course you use Sony's own LR20 batteries that I doubt you can even find these days. Or you could just plug it in. The overall construction feels okay. It's not very rugged, but as long as you don't take it on a job site, it should last fine. Now let's get into teardown mode and get to that cassette drive. The user manual and the service manual for this boombox are available online still, and I'll be referring to those to take this apart. there we have the top shell with all our main components, including the cassette drive, motherboard, the CD drive, and our display board. A couple more screws and the cassette drive comes out. The symptoms of the cassette drive are simply no power. My thought goes to the motor right away, but we'll check the belts while we're in here too. A quick look and feel of the belts, and they seem fine to me. Nothing else here seems loose or broken, but it could definitely do with a little bit of a clean. I put power directly to the motor, but nothing happens at all. It doesn't even draw any current. So let's pull it out and take a closer look. And here's a closer look at the motor. There's a date code here that suggests this has been replaced before, with a date code of 2013. Spinning the motor in my hands, it feels very sticky, almost like there's gravel or something inside of it. I can definitely say this thing is shot. When looking for replacement motors online, the only thing I could really find was this listing off of AliExpress, which would take a little while to arrive. And so since I have some time, let's take the rest of it apart and give it a bit of a clean as well. And here we have the power supply module, the primary side anyways, including the power jack, main transformer, fuses, filter capacitor, and 4 diodes that look like they're part of a full bridge rectifier. It looks like it sends the power off to the motherboard to get regulated on the secondary side there. Now let's flip the front around and get a look at those speakers. Taking a look at the left side, you can see we have a small tweeter and our 10cm 7-watt speaker. And to look from the outside, you can see that the tweeter here almost looks decorative. And then in the center we have our primary 13cm 15-watt subwoofer. Included in the front piece are the audio in and the headphone out sections, but the other part I wanted to point out were these large black ports here. These are part of an inner cavity that help enhance the bass. Seen here in this previous shot, you can see how the black ports on the bottom are connected to this large cavity in the center of the boombox. When we move on to the demonstration, I'll show you the difference these make. But now it's time to return to our cassette drive, because we have not one, but 2 motors that have come in. I decided to order 2 in case one ended up being faulty, or I needed one in the future. It is worth mentioning here that the old motor was actually adjustable via this black port at the bottom, but these new ones from AliExpress are not adjustable, meaning that you can't adjust the speed if they happen to be out of the 2400 RPM rated speed. A quick test on the power supply before we put it in, and we can see that it's pulling current and indeed spinning. So we'll install it in reverse order, throwing in a new belt along the way just because we're in here. The entire time I've been working on this boombox, it's had a bit of a smell to it, and I didn't really figure it out until I was putting it back together at this point. It seemed like somebody had sprayed WD-40 on the hinges for the handle here. I'm not sure why they thought it would work on plastic, but that would explain the spots on the inside and around the CD drive. As shown here, I'm lucky it didn't do more damage to the internals. And now that it's all finally back together and working, it's time to really test it. Of course, the first thing to do is test out our repaired cassette drive. Admittedly, I don't own a ton of cassettes myself. In fact, the only one I really had to test was this Weird Al Yankovic Much Music TV album, which would 100% get flagged for copyright, so I don't have any actual cassettes I can show off here in the video. So you'll have to take my word that this did play, even though the tape is a little bit worn out. I do have another solution, however, because you can use a Bluetooth cassette adapter and play something that way. But unfortunately, the adapter didn't play as nicely as the Weird Al tape did. The Bluetooth adapter seemed to be causing some kind of interference, and it doesn't even fit in the cassette bay due to the antenna sticking out of the side, so I wouldn't recommend using this here. But despite that, I can at least prove that the motor was the issue and the cassette drive is fixed now. And move on to the CD drive, which will hopefully be more clear. So let's see how some Silent Hill 2 sounds. That's more like it. It's sounding a lot more clear and punchy than the tape drive was. For context here, I'm using the Rock EQ with the subwoofer at the max level. In my opinion, it sounds the best that way, at least through the main speakers. Now let's try something else. I really like how this boombox sounds. I know it's a little subjective and it's hard to tell in a video as opposed to listening to it yourself, but I'm pretty impressed. Also, as promised before, here's a quick look at those ports while the music is playing. You can definitely tell these aren't there for show. The next thing I want to figure out is how loud this boombox can get. So I'm going to connect my phone using this adapter and play something to test it at full volume. So far, I've been playing music around 3 or 4 out of 10, but this time we'll be cranking it all the way up. And so, using my dB meter directly in front, and my watt meter just because I was curious, let's crank it and see what we reach. And there we go. We reached a maximum of 106 decibels at about 26 watts from the wall. You certainly wouldn't want to have your head right next to this thing at full tilt, which is somewhere around the noise level of a chainsaw or an off-road vehicle, just to put things into perspective. But that's going to be more than enough to fill a room or a garage or whatever you need. And so I did just that. I brought it out to the garage and decided to play some music while I did some work. Listen to it for a few hours and really get a feel for it. And after some time, it did quite well. It is a little bit big, but not too heavy, and so moving it around from place to place never really was that big an issue. Throughout using it, I did switch the EQ around just to see what I like best, and while the rock preset adds some more loudness to the signal, this also preset adds a bit more high-end, which was nice in the garage. However, when using the headphones, I found the flat EQ to be the best since it didn't mess with the signal at all. I wouldn't really recommend the reggae or the dance presets at all, since they seem to muffle the sound more than anything else. And with that, I think it's time to wrap this video up. I've already said that I'm impressed with this, and I'll certainly be keeping it around. But the question that I want to ask is this worth picking up in today's day and age, even as a backup in a workspace or a garage? I think the main thing is if you still have a lot of physical media, tapes or CDs around that you'd still like to play from time to time. Of course, it's hard to beat Bluetooth speakers these days, especially given how portable they are and how good they end up sounding. But if you find one at a thrift store like I did, it might be hard to beat the price. I can't say for sure, but I get the feeling that things like these are going to creep up in price just like older 80s and 90s boomboxes have. These are coming to around 20 years old now. And so if I ended up buying mine out of nostalgia, I'm sure there'll be many other people that will as well. With all that said, I'm going to leave this video here. This is my first time covering any kind of stereo equipment on the channel, so I'd appreciate some feedback in the comments and let me know if I should do videos like this again. And if you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.